You're listening to Grace, Geltman, and Weld on the Hammer Factor. Take it away, boys.
All right, are you guys ready?
Yeah, Asher takes all his clothes off now, like at a moment's notice for any reason. Like if you start laughing at him, his clothes comes off because he knows he goes to like the next level. And so Aiden and Asher fight with these swords, like these foam swords, all the time, like constantly. And so Asher came up with a wrestling name. He calls himself the Nude Dude, right? And he'll be fighting with Aiden with a sword, and then all his clothes come off. And then he's fighting naked with Aiden and a sword. This could be out in the front street. This could be in front of my arm. This could be anywhere. His clothes are off.
Oh no, here comes the Nude Dude.
He says, I'm the Nude Dude.
Well, welcome to Hammer Factor episode number 23. My name is John Grace, and thanks for listening. We got an incredible show lined up. On the horn, we have Lewis Geltman, North Fork champion and policy council for the Outdoor Alliance. Welcome, Lewis. How's it going?
Going good.
All right. Lewis is going to fill us in on the Little White race that just happened last weekend. Can't wait to hear about that. And then we have John Weld, co-owner of Immersion Research and Whitewater Legend, and father of the Nude Dude.
Nude Dude, right Nude Dude. Where you are. Hey, guys.
Welcome to the show. So, what's going on?
Well, I don't know. Later on. We're gonna talk about the new Liquid Logic Creek boat, which is getting some attention in the marketplace. Some good, some maybe some more satirical. But I want to say right now, unless the creek boat paddles pretty much like a 9-foot wave hopper, I'm not gonna like it.
Can you elaborate?
It needs to have a hull like a wave hopper, basically.
Basically, like camber instead of rocker.
That's right.
Doesn't turn.
You're gonna have to lean like way over to the left side to turn right. That's what I want.
Like a seat specifically designed to concentrate all of the forces directly on your lower spine.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I don't think it looks like that from the pictures, so
no, it does not.
You're probably not going to like it.
I think the 9R was a step in the right direction, but I've yet to see my boat of my dreams yet.
Well,
what about like a Noah Jetty? Have you checked that out before? It's got like a nice V in the bow and the stern.
The first time I paddled
nice
the green was in a Noah Jetty. That's going to date me a little bit right there. It was like the second year after John Kennedy and was it Kennedy and Visnius, right? Tom Visnius. Mm-hmm. We ran it at 200%. I didn't know it was 200%, but I know the notch was full of water. And we got there and we're like, this is Gorilla, I think. And we're all sitting there looking at it. It's me and this British guy named Alan Roberts, another guy named Boomer, and we're sitting there looking at it and we're like, they run this? And we're like, yeah, I guess they do run it. And so we ran it. I've never been so scared in my life. But there was no notch. It was completely full of water. And then years later, when I went back to run it, I was really scared of Gorilla. I was like, oh no, I have to run that thing again. Oh no. And I got there and it was like, summer levels. It was a Spencer Cook. And I was like, wait a minute. This is not the same thing I remember at all. Yeah. Noah Jetty.
There you go. So
there we go. There's my geezer
Trip
alert.
down memory lane.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, I'm done. Let's talk about stuff that's happening now.
Lewis, what do you have on the policy front? And just go ahead and take the lead after that onto Little White race report.
Policy stuff. Man, it's been a while since we recorded, eh?
Yeah.
But I would guess that you guys have all seen about Secretary Zinke's review of national monuments designated over the last 20 years, including Bears Ears, recently designated. Basically, the Trump administration is looking to roll back protections on national monuments designated over the last 20 years. This is a big deal. Whether they actually have the legal authority to do this is questionable at best, but there's a comment period right now. So if you would like to share your thoughts with Department of Interior about their ideas for rolling back protections on public lands, comments would be extremely helpful. We have like an action alert and some more explication up on outdooralliance.org. Check it out. Get involved. More to come.
So what do you say to someone who feels like the federal government just came in and took their land in Utah for this Bears Ear?
Well, I guess so. The first thing is that,
and they feel like it's government overreach. What do you feel? What would you say to them?
So the first thing is that all of these designations are on existing public land. This is not like taking private property or state land or anything like that and turning it into a national monument. Like, so this idea, like people talk about, I don't know, like government overreach or I can't remember what the term they use for it is, but it's just not accurate. It's like, these are public lands that belong to all Americans. They're located in Utah, but you guys and me, like, we're all just as much owners of these places as the people in Utah are. That said, local input on these designations, which basically they just take existing public land and change the management prescriptions a little bit to make them more protective.
Does that mean, like, if I have cattle there, I can't bring my cattle onto that property anymore, or I could before? I mean, what's the downside for people who live there?
I know all of the recent designations have grandfathered in existing grazing. If you have a mineral claim that is like a property right, they can't take that away. I think that it's just people who have this, sort of fear of the federal government, and they just don't want to see, I don't know, it's just sort of like fear of the unknown, or fear that, prospective future new grazing or new oil and gas development isn't going to happen, which I guess is accurate. But at the same time, it's not taking anything away that's going on right now, really. But, I think there's this myth that these decisions, like Yvon Chouinard shows up and whispers in Barack Obama's ear, and the next thing you know, half of Utah is a national park or something. And it's like, it just does not work that way at all. It's like Bears Ears was designated after like years and years of public outreach down there. There was legislative efforts to protect the landscape that were kind of being led by Utah's congressional delegation, who are all, quite far right Republicans. And it was part of this broader, it's part of this broader vision for the landscape, but they had protected designations that encompassed a really similar footprint as the monument. So, this it shouldn't be that controversial, but it's become this like hyper partisan thing, basically.
So what are the Republicans like? I mean, I know how the, the lawmakers from Utah feel about this, but what's their core argument to their constituents? I mean, how do they explain to them that that should not become a national
park? Well, first of all, it's not a national park, but I think,
yeah.
I think that their idea is that land management should be dictated by locals. It doesn't matter that these are national lands that we all own in common, that the people of Utah should be the ones that decide what happens there. But
that's an academic argument. You know what I mean? Why should they be that passionate about it?
Right. I think that, in a lot of ways, the constituencies behind these things, like that's, it's an academic argument in the same way that like all these ideas about, they come from the Tea Party are, right? It's like people's kind of like fanciful ideas about what the Constitution means or about federalism. I think that people get pretty enamored about these things, but, I think part of it is also this idea that, extractive industry is going to make some big comeback. And I think that's, I'm not sure how much reality there is to that argument, but regardless, it's like, that dynamic, I guess, between, protecting public lands and.
It just seems like, from what you're saying, that it seems ridiculous that there's this much anger and passion over this issue. You know what I mean? I'm not sure why someone would care.
I agree. I agree. I mean,
if there's no downside, besides extractive, energy enterprises going on there, which, like you mentioned, are not that likely anyway. Why has this become? The reason why Patagonia is leaving outdoor retailer,
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, this movement to turn over public lands to the states, and that, some of those ideas about that sort of coming to fruition, like the idea that we're going to turn over all the national public lands to the states. That's, I don't want to downplay the reality of that threat, but I think that it's sort of morphing in a lot of ways into these ideas that it's just going to be like local control, and we're not going to have, sort of this national voice on land management anymore. We're just going to let, the people who live in these places make the decisions about them. And I think that, locals always have a super important voice in land management decisions. And I think that that's as it should be. And I think it's also sort of baked into the structure of how land management decisions get made. But, there are people who just want to, want power over the decision making in these places.
So in previous shows, you were sort of a fan of Zinke. Are we still a fan of Zinke?
I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Yeah, I hope I didn't ever give that impression.
My takeaway was that you could see worse choices for this position.
Yeah, I think in the realm of people who we realistically could have gotten from Donald Trump to become the Secretary of the Interior, he was as good as we could have hoped for. And I still feel that way, but we're certainly going to have plenty to butt heads with him about. And this is going to be one of those things. And it's disconcerting.
So where exactly do we write our comments here to Mr. Zinke? I'll put it in the show notes.
Outdooralliance.org. And I think it'll direct you to regulations.gov. Little White races last weekend. It was a good time as always. I actually haven't been in, probably 3 or 4 years because it's been so low. I've sort of found an excuse to be out of town for it because it kind of pains me to think about racing the Little White at like 2.5 or whatever it's been the last few years. But it was 3.8 solid on Sunday. I think we had maybe 35 or 45 racers and 5 teams.
Who was the winner?
Old Evan Garcia took it down once again.
In what boat?
In the Gangsta. Todd Wells was second. King Hash was third. Evan, I think he had, a bit of a mistake at Island, was kind of feeling down on his run, but I pulled it out regardless. I think Annie Ole had a couple of big mistakes, kind of went for broke. And
where were you?
I was 10th.
10th?
10th.
What happened?
Yeah.
I got old, man. But I don't know. I'm just having all these shoulder problems, and I'm just pretty out of shape.
Yeah.
So I can't quite do it.
We talked about that.
But honestly, I'm stoked about it. I felt like relative to my expectations, I felt pretty good about my run. And
what were you paddling?
OG Tuna.
OG Tuna.
It's not the best race, but it stays on top well.
What was your time? What was the winning? What are the times?
I think Evan was maybe at 14:08, and I think I was 14:40 or so.
So when are you?
When
are you going to get a longboat class out there?
Yeah, could you race?
About it.
Could you get a wave hopper down that section of river? I've never done it before.
Oof. You'd have to be the man. Well, you maybe could do it. I couldn't do it.
A wave hopper is only halfway between a Tornado and a real downriver boat.
Oh, dude.
It's really hard for me to imagine getting down it in a wave hopper. And you definitely could not get down it faster than you could.
Yeah, you could take a Stinger down that river, no problem.
Yeah.
Stingers, no problem.
You could definitely race longboats. We've talked about it in the past. I think it's been kind of like a...
If you can get a Stinger down, no problem. Don't rule out the wave hopper.
Can we not talk about wave hoppers?
I would love
to agree to no wave hoppers and no
I think
SUV.
the wave hopper is kind of a lousy boat in general, but it's an interesting theoretical question. Could you get wave hopper down River X? You know what I mean?
All right, if you post,
that's a nightmare.
if you post a GoPro video of yourself taking a wave hopper down the Little White,
Yeah.
free elbow pads from Immersion Research.
You're gonna need them. You should probably get them in advance.
Come on, somebody should do it. I would do it if I was there.
It's been topo duoed.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. That's a. Have you paddled one of those 2-person kayaks?
I have.
Yeah, they're not maneuverable at all.
It still might be better than a wave hopper.
It's got to be better than a wave hopper.
No way. You guys are crazy.
Maybe.
Have you paddled wave hopper before, Geltman?
Have I paddled a wave hopper before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
First time I paddled one was the Ohio Pal race, actually.
It's like a stinger. I mean, it's like a stinger with a little less rocker.
Well, I haven't been out to the Little White race since.
Stinger, but it doesn't.
Quit talking about wave hoppers, guys. Seriously, people are dropping off left and right.
All right.
But here, something we did that was really cool was when they announced the results, they counted it down to the top 4, and then instead of like revealing the top 4 results, we watched on split screen the GoPros from all the top 4 people, not knowing who had won. So it was like watching the whole race head to head.
Super fun.
Which was like just super cool. It was like when we started doing it, I was like, are we really about to watch like 14 minutes of GoPro? But like as soon as it started, it was just like totally engrossing, and like everybody was everyone who was at the party was like super into it, and everybody's cheering, and it was like really interesting to watch where people were making up and losing time, and it was like a really cool idea.
Nice.
Definitely worth.
A while back, Weld, I was telling you, I was like, man, in events anymore, you don't need a start time and a finish line. All you need to do is put cameras on people. Remember that?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, awesome race course. Great race. Big props for getting out there and representing for the Hammer Factor, Geltman.
Hanging in there.
Did
Get you guys out here next year.
Hammer Factor? Did you see you're sponsored by Hammer Factor? Like to make a
Did not
shout out
occur
to Riverine Hammer Factor?
I definitely had a few people come up and ask me if I was the guy from that podcast, though.
Yeah.
What do you say? No. That's
You recognize the voice. What do you think?
All right,
generation.
What's next on our list?
Just be like, what do you want me to sign? Quickly. I have to get to the line.
All right, what's next on our list, Weld?
Let's talk about the Hammer Factor website real quick.
Oh, God, here we go. This is the
I want to hear about Grace.
3 minutes of bashing on Grace. Here we go.
I want to hear about this.
I'm going to step out for a second. You guys go ahead.
What?
Was that list?
The Silverback?
Hear about the Silverback. Let's talk about Grace's.
Okay, so we have Green River Games happen this weekend. This was the reason I couldn't make it out to actually it was because I had broken ribs, but we have a big race, mountain biking, trail running, and kayaking on the Green River called the Green River Games. It was killer. We had like 150 athletes come out this year for all the events, and one of our events is called the Silverback, and it's a mountain bike. You have to run the Green River Narrows, do like a 9-mile, 2,000 vertical feet of climbing, mountain bike lap, and then you do a super similar lap on a trail run. So all in all, it takes most racers about 5 hours to complete this race. And we had Erin Savage. She's our female champion. She's never lost this event. She set a new course record. And then we had a guy, Zach Frazier. Have you guys ever heard of Zach Frazier? He's a local guy. Used to paddle with Jeff West quite a bit. And anyway, the water was high this year, so that was a big help. But he blew away the course record by like 10 minutes, 11 minutes, or something like that.
Was he in a wave hopper?
No, he was in a proper longboat.
Up your alley. Where are you on this one?
Yeah, it's too hard for Weld.
Right up your alley.
I know. I was a Stony Creek Fest with my kid, paddling Stony Creek here in Johnstown.
Anyway, it was hot. It was 87 degrees and sunny, and it was killer. It was. I mean, just anytime you have good water, stoke is high. I mean, it's just like the little white race. Everybody was fired up, even if they were 39th place or whatever you said, because they got to run the little white at good flow. You know what I mean? So it was really good. And then we had the Oscar Blues Enduro. I got some leftover beer from the event. I'm drinking right now. But it was killer. We had like 81 racers. We had 8 different states represented. A guy, Seth Kemp, won it. He's a 2-time champion. The level of riding out there, it just blows me away when you see someone who's really good on a mountain bike, just the things they gap. It's just like watching a really good kayaker, you know? It's just like watching Weld and his wave hopper. Anyway, it was sweet. All right, bash on my website, Weld.
No, I'm not going to bash on your website. I'm just going to say if you've been to there is a hammerfactor.com, and it is of marginal use, but we're working on revamping it.
Did you have to go to Vietnam to have fast enough internet to?
I have to do all that stuff from here. You can't do anything like that at IR because people start yelling and throwing stuff at you. But we're going to have the website will be slowly built out, so it'll be of use to people, and they can when you check on show notes, you can actually go someplace to see them.
Yeah, we do get a lot of comments about that. So thanks a lot, John.
All right, so audio. I guess the audio quality of our podcast is next on the list of things to address, but I have to pass it on to you, Grace.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. If just the 3 of us did the show, we could make it sound top notch. Pretty much turnkey, but the problem is when we have to integrate callers. So we'll work on it. We'll see what we can do there. And we have to deal with your internet service, so that's a big. I
don't know.
So, Lewis, do you want to introduce? Are we ready for our first celebrity guest or special guest?
Brett Mayer is a kayaker from the Potomac, Great Falls boater. He's a teacher in Northern Virginia, and he's been working on some kind of advanced degree program, and he's written this paper that he will explain to us about the differences between how kayaking is portrayed in popular media and how people who participate in the sport sort of experience it themselves. And I thought it was kind of interesting. And we'll have Brett to explain more here in a second.
To defend his thesis.
Yeah. Again, yeah, exactly. This will be good practice for him.
And it will be a defense.
Professor Grace and Professor Wells are going to...
First question I'm going to ask Brett is, why did he single out whitewater?
And why did he have to bring IR into it? It's not fair. I didn't want IR in anyone's thesis for anything, especially under those circumstances.
Oh yeah, I forgot that there was a bit of a fight in there. How's it going, Brett?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Man, you look super professional.
Yeah. That's how we work here in the.
Are you in a classroom?
Well, yeah, I'm in sort of the science library in the science offices at Episcopal High School. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, welcome to the Hammer Factor, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be on.
All right, so I just gave these guys a little bit of an introduction, but I'm sure that I did not do your paper justice. So do you want to maybe just start us off by tell us a little bit about yourself and this piece that you've written, your theories for us?
My theories. Yeah, sure.
Prepare yourself for Grace and Weld's dubiousness.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. They wouldn't be the only ones. Yeah, I mean, I started working on this, it's almost 3.5 years ago now. I was working at a school up in New England, paddling, I'm an environmental educator and kind of outdoor educator. That's my profession that I've been in since I've been probably about 24. And kind of, my trajectory through, the paddling world kind of led me to start asking some sort of introspective questions about what the heck I was doing out there all along, and kind of what the point was, just sort of this question of why we go paddling. And I started wondering if kind of some of my experiences were shared among some of my friends. And I started all this by, I decided to take a graduate school program at a school in Arizona called Prescott. And the degree is in adventure education. And, my original idea was I was going to go out and do this program in adventure ed and kind of, do some cool, awesome things outside and pick up some certs. And I had no idea what I was getting into, and kind of the sort of academic level of seriousness of this world. And so it really opened my eyes to looking at adventure in a very different context than I had, up to that point in my life. And so one of the early courses I was taking in this program was called Spirituality in Adventure Education, kind of looking at spiritual, experiences that people have when they go on adventures, and then, sort of how to try to incorporate and set the stage for some of those experiences for participants in programs. So I had a final project, so I decided to do a film project, and I was like, I'm going to go out I had a trip in the Grand Canyon, a self-support coming up with some buddies. So I went to the Grand Canyon with the intent to film a documentary called Why We Go. And I asked each of the guys on the trip to define nature, adventure, risk, and spirituality, and kind of weave them into a narrative about why they go paddling. And so that was sort of the outset of this trip. And, we kind of go into the canyon. As you know, it's an amazing place. So I'm going in and kind of in this place in my life where, I'm a new dad. I'm at this boarding school in New England. My wife and I are from Virginia, Maryland area. I'm really based on the Potomac River, Great Falls. And so I'm kind of away from home, a new dad, and just sort of in this really kind of uptight New England boarding school environment. So not in the, I'm just sort of already in an introspective place, and then asking these questions about paddling. And so I go into the canyon, and on the 10th day of this trip, everybody wakes up and tells me, all right, Mayor, we're ready, to kind of give you our definitions and our story, and kind of share this idea of why we go. And I'm like, great. So we wake up, everybody kind of pours their heart out on camera. And some of the guys are just, talking about all the reasons they go paddling: for friendship, for connection, for adventure. And they're talking about defining an adventure. And adventure is when you can't just call a helicopter up and get out when you want to. You got to see it through to the end. And so it's kind of like this eerie foreshadowing, unbeknownst to me at the time, but 8 hours later I was, calling a helicopter from a sat phone because my best friend died later on that afternoon after we ran lava. And so then a whole series of chaotic events sort of ensued in the next 2 days. We spent the night on the beach with them, and had 50 more miles to go before we made it out.
Can I back you up for 1 second and just ask what happened there? I'm sorry to pry at it.
No, that's fine. So, and that's, I'm happy to share. It's hard to talk about, actually, even though it's been 3 years. But, it's sort of, we got to lava. We all ran lava, and then there's the Tequila Beach stop afterwards that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. And this was, I didn't know what the tradition was when we, got to that point. But, everybody, there was a bunch of other groups in the mix. Everybody kind of took a celebratory shot. And we were a group of 9, and 6 of us were pretty tired and kind of eager to get to camp. And so we put on, and it's a flat float to Whitmore Wash. And so we kind of floated down to 188. And 3 of the guys kind of hung out in the back. And, I think they just sort of got away with, got kind of caught up in the moment. And unbeknownst to any of us, they started, hitting a little bag of cinnamon Fireball. and we were all in camp and kind of wondering where they were, and we kind of heard them laughing, but we were kind of all in a screen of mesquite, so we didn't have a direct line of sight to the river, and they came floating past, and one of the guys who was on the beach, he kind of shouted back, he's like, "Hey, Drew's swimming," and it's just kind of flat moving water, and we're like, "Oh, what do you mean he's swimming?" And so we were a little confused, but they seemed like they were just kind of horseplaying and having a good time, which is what we assumed. And then about 45 minutes went by, and I kind of just had this kind of feeling where I was like, I wonder what's going on. And we went and looked, and we couldn't see downstream. We kind of walked around the bend, and I saw a boat upside down, and I saw one guy pulling the boat back to shore. And I was like, all right, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I couldn't see the other two. And so anyway, we hiked downstream, kind of had to cross this big scree field, and we kind of thought we had an all okay on the head. And so we went back up, and I told everybody, I was like, we better break camp. I don't know what's going on, but we better get back down there and kind of see what's up. And so everybody's kind of packing up, and I got in my boat, and I floated halfway down. And as I was halfway down, the guy, one of our buddies that we had sent to go communicate with, the guys down there, he waved me in, and he was like, Kurt's dead.
Man.
Yeah, sorry, it's a pretty heavy story.
Well,
and
I'm sorry to bring that up. I don't want to make the show about that, but I felt like
that's all right. I figured it would come up. I mean, that could sort of, it could be a whole thing in and of itself. But I mean, just sort of this is sort of how I got started on this idea of kind of digging in. It wasn't just sort of the nature of the events that happened, but it was sort of like the intentions of the questions that I was asking going into the trip. Like there was a sort of like, I kind of threw these questions out there and got, I got answers that I got answers and got them in a way that I could have never imagined. So it was sort of a crucible of a different kind. I think a lot of people, when they start whitewater paddling, some people that might be kind of what is appealing to them, kind of testing their limits, testing their mettle. Obviously, of course, in addition to having fun, and challenging themselves in all these ways, and community and all these parts of what makes paddling so great. And I think for me, I was always sort of looking for that kind of crucible type experience to really test myself. And I had, a lot of great adventures, but this was something that was, unexpected and kind of a crucible of a different kind that kind of really made me look deeply at just sort of the community and also, the reasons that we do what we do, and kind of, I think, sort of the popular mythos, within adventure sports culture.
So tell us about your paper. What's your thesis?
So my thesis basically with this paper is basically, I started looking at common media representations of extreme sports, and finding, a lot of the ways I think that certain companies, portray extreme sports. They tell it's a very kind of myopic view of our world. It's sort of a lot of the imagery that we see is sort of, I think, predicated around kind of risk. It's sort of risk obsessed in a lot of ways. And risk is a
so you're talking about like immersion research here, principally, right?
Principally talking about immersion. Yeah.
I mean, our Super Bowl ad notwithstanding, I think our ad campaign has generally been very low key and more family friendly.
Yeah. Obviously, any of these things, my whole motivation, I think, really has become to kind of really just bring some more introspective conversation to the forefront of paddling communities here and elsewhere. And I think anything that I say, like, I would never be, arrogant enough to think any of my theories kind of like hold weight for anybody. but just sort of, I think the purpose is to sort of share some of the ideas and kind of, maybe some of what could be true for some people that are out in the community. And it'll give, hopefully, people just a moment to kind of think about some of these things and what they're doing the next time they're out on the river making a decision, or, how paddling relates to their lives, or whatever.
So the idea is, maybe see if I've gotten it correctly, is that there's this sort of broad sort of popular marketing of adventure sports, like what you would see like in a Red Bull ad or something like that. And it sort of spins what people in sports like ours are doing as this sort of man versus nature.
Yeah, I think
bra undertaking, yet in reality, most of us don't really experience it that way. And there are people sort of coming into the sport who you see maybe like in like an introductory kayaking class or something like that, who think that they're going to go out and, go run Palouse next weekend and it's going to be sick, brah. But that's not really what it's about for most people. And there's sort of like a disconnect there. Is that kind of the idea?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, that's pretty much the idea. And I think that, again, it doesn't hold true in all situations, but I think these representations of the sport are out there. If you look at people that have participated for long periods of time and what the research in the field shows, people that participate in whitewater kayaking and adventure sports, their reported experiences are very much in contrast with this kind of narrative of conquest and domination over nature that we see. And so, my concern is that some of the ways that the media popularizes notions of what our sport is and what these sports are is in conflict with what reported experiences are from individuals who are on the inside. So kind of that outside versus insider perspective. And I think the other thing that happens is that insiders in the community, especially when you're first starting out, if you haven't done any of those things yet, you have the potential to be sort of influenced by some of those types of images and experiences because you have no experience. And I think some of the terms that we use in our community, like, a beater or something, those types of things. I mean, I think that's, we're getting at those things. Some of the people that are kind of elderly or kind of more experienced in the community. You know what I mean?
The John Weld types.
Yeah, thanks. I knew it was going to come to that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had articles written about various kayaking exploits we've done by, people like the Washington Post or USA Today. And when you read them, you're always struck by the sense that the writer did not understand anything we were doing at all. And it was basically a version of clickbait, where they're trying to, romanticize at the very least what we were doing and, sell a group of insane kids doing something stupid, more likely, And then we always had the running joke was the last thing we wanted to be was covered in Outside Magazine because it was either going to be an extreme event or they totally take interest in you if someone died, basically. If someone got killed, you could be assured that Outside Magazine was going to call and want to do a story on it. And when we did our trip to Baffin, that was the first thing they asked. They said, well, did anybody die? And we said, no. And they said, well, then we can put you in the news briefs at the beginning. That was kind of the long and short of it.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, there you go. I would love to put that in what I'm writing. That's a perfect example.
At the same time, it's like,
but people in the participants of the sport know that too. I mean, it's kind of a running joke that's not accurate, nor is it what we do.
Yeah, no, that is a running joke. I think it's a running joke among people that have been around long enough to understand. And I think, sometimes I think I wonder about people that are entering the sport, and we can all see that there's things that they just don't know and they don't quite get the whole picture yet.
At the same time, it's like, I think there's been some sort of like much improved general media pieces. Like I thought that all of that coverage in the New York Times about those guys climbing the Dawn Wall last year, like that was pretty good. Like I think that you could tell that there was, you could look at the comments and people were like kind of focusing on this like danger aspect of it. But I thought that like when they told the story, they did a good job of explaining that this is not really like a dangerous undertaking. It's really much more of a technical challenge in a beautiful place, but not something that's really like fundamentally that dangerous. And I guess it's been cool to see. I feel like every once in a while you see something in popular media where you're like, this is getting better. It's like in some ways it's like almost like these sports like ours have become, I don't know, just more normalized, or I don't think kayaking has become insanely popular or anything, but I think that there's just much more general understanding than there used to be. I don't know, does that ring true to you guys at all?
I mean, the barrier to entry for kayaking, as far as I can tell, is flipping over. In current with your head underwater. That's where most people are like, no, not interested. But hey, Gracie, a couple of years ago, you were doing this peak adventure thing, which I think deep down at its heart was a thinly veiled Ponzi scheme of some sort. I'm still not quite sure how you're going to get money out of people for it, but there's also some surface, talk about a similar theme here, right?
Yeah.
What was peak adventure exactly?
Yeah. Well, Brett, you're familiar with the adventure paradigm, right?
Yeah.
And so what without getting too specific, basically what the adventure paradigm says is when you're, and man, I've forgotten a lot of it, but there's recreation, there's adventure, there's peak adventure, then there's misadventure.
John Grace adventure, where you write him a check.
Yeah. Jesus, I'm talking.
Or credit card.
And then there's tragedy, I believe it is.
Yes,
Yeah,
like exactly.
That. And so basically what it kind of says is that when you're right on the tip of peak adventure, imagine it like you're like an RPM meter on a car. When you're at peak adventure, you're redlining, you're maximizing your experience, you're getting the most bang for your buck, the most return on your time investment right before you drop into misadventure. And so that adventure paradigm is something that is kind of associated with a lot of activities we do. And unfortunately, for a lot of adventure sports and whatnot, the fun isn't really being had until you're starting to peg the meter a little bit. And
I mean, if you paddle with Tom McEwen, you're deep into misadventure before anyone's having fun. I could tell from many first-hand experiences that is exactly how he feels about it.
And kind of
Same.
Kind of a long time ago, and I didn't finish my story because I never got the check. Well, was that
there was a website, by the way, involved with like Peak Adventure TV or something,
you
right?
Don't always. Man, you know what? I'm retiring from the show. I'm done. You guys take it from here. Anyway.
It's like the kayaking Gawker. There's just a string of kind of interrelated websites.
Yeah.
It's recursive blogging, you guys.
That's right.
Anyway, unintentionally, when you're having an adventure, you are trying to get the meter as far into peak adventure as you can, even if that's not your decision starting out. You want that. Adventurers are craving that, and some people's meter goes a little further than other people's, but that's just part of what makes adventure. Am I saying that right, Brett?
Yeah, there's that peak adventure experience, and then sort of concordantly, there's also this guy Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. If you guys have ever seen kind of that book Flow, it's from 1990. But his whole theory was the same guys that were kind of putting forth that peak adventure experience while they were doing that. This guy Csikszentmihalyi is writing about this idea of flow, and it's that same idea is that there, if you look at a graph, there's skill and challenge, and what you're saying is that where you're kind of pushing the meter is basically the challenge that you're taking on is just slightly, like just ever so little bit above where your skill level is. So, that's kind of where the progression happens. Like you're taking a new risk, taking a risk by doing that. And if you push it too far, it has the chance to go badly. But yeah, I mean, it's this sort of same idea. And that those, when we say things like we're in the zone, or we're feeling it, or you're in the, like, that's all basically you're kind of in this experience of flow. And I think, that's definitely something that keeps people seeking adventure time and time again. In those experiences, people are all wired differently. So those flow experiences experiences are going to be different for each individual. You know, how you experience the flow experience or what it takes to get you there is going to be very different than, you know, someone who's not interested in kayaking, or, you know, the barrier to entry is if you're rolling over, and like that's just not going to be a non-starter. People can experience flow like in their day-to-day, in their work environment, writing a paper, playing music, all kinds of different ways.
But is there something intrinsically wrong with people pursuing kayaking for that purpose, or for advertisers latching on to that?
Well, I don't
No,
think Brett's
desire.
saying, I don't think Brett's
no,
saying
I'm not
it's
saying
wrong.
that at all. Yeah, I would never say that, and I would, you know, nothing what I'm saying. I mean, I quite the opposite. I think kayaking is a great thing, and I think what I'm trying to eventually say, you know, once I sort of finish everything, is, you know, I would love to see the better side of our, like, I want to see the kayaking community kind of always sort of thinking about like what their intentions are when they're going to the river, so that when we're kind of communicating what the community and the experience is all about back to others, that we're always sort of doing our best to show the better side of ourselves. Because in these adventure experiences, I think, you know, we're uniquely positioned to do things like public advocacy for rivers, or to even when it comes just to sort of advocating for like how valuable it is to get out there and connect with nature and some of the positive psychological benefits of those experiences. I mean, we live, you know, the generation, you know, been teaching for the past 12 years. I mean, every year, like, kids' attention spans seem to be getting shorter and shorter, and they seem to be, you know, increasingly disconnected. Just even in 12 years, you know, sort of anecdotally, you know, the degree of disconnection with nature is more and more. And so if kids don't have a connection, you know, you can't come to know, love, and protect you can't love and protect, you know, what you don't know. And so I think, you know, that's where I feel like it's important to really talk about these things, because it's sort of our experiences, being able to kind of realistically portray those things in a way that's inspiring others to get out there and kind of connect in whatever way works for them. You know, it might not be a Class 5 river, it might just be a walk in the forest, but I feel like the more we can sort of decrease the focus on the risk and kind of focus on some of those other things, I think we can use what our communities are doing for the greater good of kind of protecting the places that we love and play.
Yeah. Let me say, I really like the paper here, and we're going to have to do a whole show on Cumberland Falls, or Cucumber Falls, because that's hilarious. Well, when the boys came into work that day, were you just like, yeah, way to crush it, you know, represent?
I thought it was, I mean, personally, I thought it was kind of neat. You know, I mean, I hadn't seen the video until later. I didn't see the video till later, but they all explained to me it wasn't as bad as it looked, but it looked pretty bad.
Anyway, one thing
the crisis that I'm in, or the situation I'm in, is that
I
the
have
only
the pulpit.
reason I paddle, the only reason people paddle with me is to watch me swim. And I can say almost without exception, the only reason I paddle with other people is to watch them swim. Particularly,
that is why John Weld goes kayaking, to watch.
Yeah.
When was the last time you swam?
That's weird, dude. That's weird. All right.
It's been a couple years. The next one's gonna be a doozy.
Where was the last place you swam?
I've been Great Falls, high water. I know I've swum since then. I can't think of it offhand.
Where were you?
I have to think about it.
What decade was this in?
40s, late 40s, late 50s.
So a couple things I want to say about your article here, Brett, before we move on from it, is you reference a lot of things in this. Let's say a couple things. Okay, number one, when we talk about getting youth engaged in the sport or whatnot, unfortunately, if it takes showing something extreme or something that relates to them or something that their friends are going to think is cool on Facebook, and it gets them involved in the sport and sharing it with people, as long as, you know, I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, because they're, you know, a lot of youth, unfortunately, they don't have the experiences for those deeper things to resonate with them. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. But if they see something that attracts their eye, get a little bit of eye candy, and they get into the sport, and that's the avenue to get them there. I don't see that as a negative.
Yeah, I agree too. I don't disagree with that. I think I would say an all the more reason for, I think, people that have been paddling for longer periods of time who kind of can see beyond just that they're sort of acting as mentors and guides in the community. And so that as these kids, if that's what hooks them in, great. But then there's a larger narrative there that they're able to tap into, as they're trying to find their way.
And also, I see a lot of companies, and forgive me if I'm a little defensive of this, because there was a long period of time when I was kind of the whipping post for people talking about this kind of thought, like I was bad for the sport or things that I was affiliated with or whatever. But there are a lot of companies right now. You look at like the stories that Yeti is making with a lot of their films. NRS has done a great job of this, of making some more in-depth films that talk about various things. Yep. Weld has his Site Z website that has got some very in-depth things that are going on. There's like Werner Paddles does a whole lot of just talking about instruction and basic safety, and they spend a lot of time and money kind of putting that message out there. So I just think that when you reference, there are things like Immersion Research and Cucumber Falls, but there's also other things that kind of maybe balance that out. So anyway,
yeah,
great. I mean, a lot of work here, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, and I agree, of course. I mean, I think that's a good point too, and that's probably something that I'll eventually include as sort of examples to the contrary, media that kind of does the opposite. And I think NRS has done a great job, and a lot of other folks that are putting more kind of contemplative pieces out there, which is good.
Well, does anybody have anything else for Brett? Is there anything else you'd like to add here to?
I think this could go on for hours. If
this could go on for hours. This is great.
Yeah, it could go on for a while. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I've gotten a chance to talk to. I mean, I interviewed Tom McEwen, Risa Shimoda, Steve Graybill, kind of some local paddlers. I interviewed Jeff Calhoun and Mariah Heaney. And I think sort of this idea of participation, motivation in the sport over time and how it changes. So this kind of paper that I kind of passed along to you is sort of the initial kind of thought process, and then I went out and kind of did my own research and sort of kind of looking at, I did like a 4-hour interview with each of those individuals, and then I kind of condensed them into like a 5-minute film to kind of capture the overall tone of what they were trying to say. And it's interesting. I think, maybe what's true for female paddlers isn't necessarily true for the male paddlers. I mean, it's a small sample, obviously, so whatever findings there might be, isn't definitive in any way, but it's just sort of suggestive. I don't know. I think there was sort of evidence in at least this guy Steve Graybill's story of kind of going through this experience of kind of being pulled into the sport, like very much like what you're saying, through this idea of wanting to be really good at something, to challenge himself, to kind of take risks. And it was kind of all about that for a long period of time. And until he has this experience that kind of shows him, he kind of realizes what the consequences might be. And that might be a kind of a common theme, I think, among folks, is that as they go along and they kind of realize what the consequences are, that kind of changes their narrative a little bit. Shane Groves is another guy I've talked to, Adam Johnson, and they all kind of said similar things that, it was about competition. It was about some of these sort of more ego-driven aspects in the beginning of their paddling careers. But as they kind of moved forward, it became much more about just getting out with their friends, getting in touch with nature on a regular basis, and just kind of, just enjoying it, I think.
Amen.
Yeah. And I think that's a neat thing. And I think there's aspects, I think that's kind of like the lesson that the river teaches you, over time. And it's not that competing isn't great, because it is, and it's not like all of those other things aren't important. But I think just if you're a new person in the sport, one thing I might say is just to realize, if anything else, like however you feel right now when you're 16, 17, or however when you're starting, that your idea and kind of your connection to paddling is going to inevitably change over time. And, maybe that's something that you just think about in terms of the decisions that you make on the river. And it's just another tool to kind of have in your back pocket, the same thing as like a safety rope or whatever.
Very cool.
Run stouts, get money. That's it for me.
Yeah, run stouts, get money.
Watch your buddy swim.
Cucumber!
Plain and simple.
Thanks a lot, Brett.
Adam.
Brett, is there a place that our viewers can follow your work or see some insight? I know that this is not a published piece yet, but I'm sure there's going to be some people who are going to want to follow what you're doing.
Yeah, I've got a site that I started a couple months ago. It's brettmayer.exposure.co. So that's out there. I've got to make it a little bit easier for folks to find, but I've kind of written some just sort of personal essays on some of these things, my experience in the Grand Canyon. And then there's also a piece that, it's got a bunch of reads right now. It's called The Kid, but that's been kind of widely circulated around the community, it seems. And that's kind of about a student that I taught to paddle and kind of some of his, our relationship on the river and just some of the trials and tribulations and things that he's kind of gone through over the years as a young paddler, which has been another inspiration to me to kind of pursue this work. So,
very cool, man.
We should get Adam Herzog, who's running Sites Ed, to see if he can publish some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put some stuff up there as well. Great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks, Brad.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Cool.
man.
Pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon.
Later.
You guys there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. That was cool. Cucumber Falls. Yoo-hoo.
Was that really that big of a deal? I guess it was, huh?
I thought it was.
I just thought it was some goofy waterfall you could run with a bunch of sticks in it.
It was just what it was. It was just like the music of the video and the delivery, and it was just awesome. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say about that.
I was like, is this for real? Like,
Yeah, Billy Hearn was.
Billy Hearn.
I love it when Billy Hearn gets on these public venues and puts words in my mouth. That's great.
All right, we don't have time for viewer mail, guys. We're going to have to do that next week because we're already at 1 hour and 4 minutes, and we haven't got to our celebrity guest, Pat Keller. So let's.
Yes, we have to do that.
Let's see if
all
we
those
can.
guys posting hammer emojis are going to be excited for our upcoming conversation about speed pockets or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Pat Keller just launched. Pat. Let's just. Like you were saying earlier, Lewis, Pat is 2 for 2 in boat design. So,
What do you mean 2 for 2? One's Brap? What's 2?
Green boat.
One was actually the green boat.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah. So I was
That's
saying that
quite a freshman effort there.
Yeah.
I'm a little dubious about this boat, but Pat gets
I told you.
a real benefit of the doubt with
I
the green
told
boat
you
wrap in my
it's
book.
not a 9-foot wave hopper. I'm gonna pan it.
Pat, are you there?
Yeah, what's up, guys?
Hey, Pat, you're on with Lewis and Weld. Welcome to the Hammer Factor.
That's CNN calling
Hey,
in the
guys, how's
background.
How's it going, bud?
Good, man. Thanks for bringing me on.
Pat Keller, what makes you think you could design boats? Because you're not a Shane Benedict, you're not a Robert Pearson, you don't have the chops. What gives you the right to think you can start designing boats? Like, how does this happen?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think you've known me long enough to know that I've got a good long history in whitewater kayaking. I love it with all of my heart, and I think I have a good handle on boat design. One, from the many, many years I spent playing with little tiny wooden boats in the creeks.
Yeah.
From about age 10 until really now when I'm 30 years old. Most of my time was spent thinking about kayaking or playing with those little wooden scale models or drawing up designs for boats. Some of the old Piranha guys will vouch for me that I sent in redesigns of the Micro back when I was, I think, like 14 or 15 years old. So I've been all about it. I also do have a history as far as designing boats. I designed the Dagger Green boat, and then came over to Liquid Logic and designed the Brap, and then worked with Shane a little bit on the Mullet. And now I've got a creek boat that I'm really happy with. I can't wait to share with everybody. It's got some cool features that have come from that history of paddling boats, watching the little wooden boats in the water, seeing how the water affects certain shapes. And I'm really excited to get it out there and see what everybody thinks.
I mean, before we get to the Delta, is it Delta V or Delta 5? How do we say that?
It's the Delta V, but it's kind of a double story because Delta V is change in velocity.
Right.
Where if you read it with a little bit of a Roman numerical mind, you can read it as Delta, as in Delta brainwaves, deep dreaming, kind of recovery, that sort of thing. 5, so dreaming of class 5. So
I mean, I saw that. I was thinking 5.
We had fun with, and okay, yeah. Well, I mean, it's 6 one, half a dozen the other. We're calling it the Delta V.
So I mean, this is nerdy, but what do you use to design? Like, what kind of software or tools do you use to design a boat like this? Just out of curiosity.
This is the fun part, man. I spent, I think, 5 months on it, and it's all hand-shaped. So
all
hand-shaped. One of the reasons why I love working with Liquid Logic is that we have the capacity to do some CAD designs, but we usually save that for the seats, where we put a lot of like surfboard style love into the boats by hand shaping them. And this one, the Delta V, we actually started with the Jefe Grande platform. So not only are we recycling foam and not making this whole new foam thing and paying money and using virgin foam to produce this thing, we use the recycled boat that already has a good platform, already has a good midsection. And I only wanted to do a few minor adjustments to the Grande to come out with what I wanted to design, this new creek boat. But then once I got in, there was a new idea and a new idea and a new idea. And it just kind of hit me like flowing through a little, like working on a painting or something. It was just more and more that I kept thinking about that I wanted to try. And since the boat has been put into prototype form, we got to test out some of those things, and I'm really excited with how it works, and can't thank Liquid Logic and Shane and all those guys enough for giving me the time of day and giving me the chance to kind of take it and run with it.
There's something to that because, we have a really expensive pattern making software, but sometimes there's no beating just getting a pen and some cardboard and designing a pattern by hand. You just get a better feel for the garment that way. So let's talk about displacing.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, displacing hull versus planing hull in a creek boat. What do you think? And how did that come to pass in the Delta V?
Well, up to this point, there seems to be 2 distinct camps. The kind of
one is, and I'm going to say
death
right now,
camp,
one is wrong and one is right. The planing hull camp is the wrong camp. I'll give you a clue, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, in some areas I agree, but for it depends on what your application is. If you're in the big water environment, planing hull might help because that sort of scenario, you're trying to keep straight and keep your momentum going as you're dealing with boils and cross currents. And that's where that planing hull being able to slip sideways can be of real benefit. Now, if we're talking about creaking and bouncing off rocks and over waterfalls and such, I strongly believe in the displacement hull design, as it's just less things for it to catch on. If you're bouncing down something sideways, you don't want that last hit to catch your rail and power flip you down into the landing. There might be rocks down there. So I'm a firm believer in having a nice round displacement hull to keep it from doing anything that would surprise you or that you don't want to have happen. But what I think is really cool about designs moving forward is you can have a little bit of a mixture. Like with the Delta V, we put a very flat section of about 2.5 feet long by about 1.5 feet wide underneath the paddler's seat. So you have a little bit of a flat area that you can maneuver with like you would with a planing hull, but you keep all the benefits of that nice smooth edge that's not going to try and surprise you and flip you onto your head.
So Grace, you paddled this boat.
There's been 2 camps, but
yeah,
it just depends on your application and what you need to use it for.
So Grace, you paddle this boat. What do you think?
It's
Pat full of shit, or is this the real deal?
No, it's the real deal. It's a super stable boat. I got in it and immediately felt comfortable. It was a day out on the green when I got in the boat, ran everything, felt fine. So to me, that's what you need in a boat that you're going to be running Class 5 in. It needs to be something that you don't have to learn.
Would you say this is a boat that's going to be, we talked a couple episodes ago about the Machno versus the 9R in terms of usability. I mean, where do you think?
I'll tell you the difference. The difference is the feel of the kick rocker, because I've paddled both the Machno and this boat and the Delta V, and there's something with the kick rocker, and I don't know if it's that brat feeling that when you get it up and you're going fast, it kind of pulls in a second gear, but it's got a really cool hull. Which, Pat, on the website, there's no pictures of the hull. Is there a place to find a picture of the hull?
No, that's a great idea, Grace. We didn't really take many photos of the hull, right? To be honest, it was because the prototype was kind of beat up. So the boat that we were taking the model photos of,
Right.
That's just what we had at the time, and we didn't really want to flip it around and go too much into it. But we do have the mold. It arrived this morning. So we'll be able to crank a few out and get some updated photos on the website for you guys to check out.
Okay, cool. Because let me just go through a couple comments here from some of our listeners. Get Pat on the show. What is up with the turbo boosters? Turbo booster pockets, question mark. And so we had like 4 or 5 people talk about these deck lines and whatnot. And then one person's like, why no picture of the hull? Is it oil?
Well, we're putting turbo booster pockets on all of our dry suits for 2018. And Pat, you're going to be hearing on that at a later time, so we'll pick this up then.
But let me back up to my original.
That's turbo pocket TM, by the way.
Let me back up to my original thing. So,
Right.
Can you just, before we get into the turbo booster pockets, can we just talk about the hull for a second? Can you talk about the hull, because it doesn't have a typical creek boat shaped hull, like its profile.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And one of the areas that I've spent the most time back there in R&D working on this boat is to get the hull exactly right, just how I wanted it. Now, with the BRAP, we brought in the kick rocker, which is a little toss over to slalom, where those guys have the most agile, the fastest, and quickest reacting boats on the planet. And I wanted to try and utilize some of those features that hasn't really been tapped into the whitewater realm or the plastic boat realm as much, and utilize it to make our boats perform and act like a slalom boat. And this is where the development of the Delta V really got fun for me, because I was able to take and run with whatever type of boat, really creek boat, I wanted to make. And there's the whole trend toward fast 9-foot long boats, which is great. And I think it's great for the sport. I think the racing is going to push us into the next environment. But I wanted to back up and build a boat that was able to slow stuff down, that you can kind of approach drops and have the time to kind of think and correct before you go off. So I wanted speed and maneuverability from a slalom boat, but I wanted a very creek boat, boater friendly, really, really hard stuff friendly hull. So
You
what
wanted it all.
I did is
You wanted everything.
it all, right. So to get what I wanted to get out of it, I flipped the Grande plug over, and I just spent multiple days, no machines, no nothing, no like electric sanders, because I wanted to take my time and sand it down to right where my eyeballs were saying, boom, this looks good. So I started with the kick rocker, and I brought all that up, rolled it off so it wouldn't land too harshly and flat. And then with the bow, I took a nice chunk out of the Jefe Grande's bow rocker. If you look at the Jefe Grande from the side, the rocker goes out past the feet, and then there's a big lump where it starts to move uphill. That's great for landing off waterfalls and makes it soft, but I wanted a little bit more lift, and I wanted a little bit better ferry feel, where the Grande, as soon as you start poking your bow out into the current to make a ferry, that lump is going to load up and try and yank your bow downstream and point it downstream. Where with a smoother kick rocker going up, similar to what we put into the Brap and similar to what we have in the Remix, you can keep your bow lifted a little bit to over that mean piece of current that's going to try and rip your bow downstream. So that progressive smooth bow rocker combined with the kick rocker that you can then get your weight over the back, you can lift your bow as you're doing a ferry and keep it out of the yanking current, if you will, and make moves really quickly, really efficiently by using micro movements of your torso.
So let's suppose I'm Joe Consumer out there, and had my heart set on a tuna because, I mean, that's what Evan paddles, and I have to have that. But now you're kind of throwing a wrench in the system because you just introduced this thing, and now I'm like, man, what do I do now? Because Pat Keller designed this boat, and John Weld loves the Brap, and this sounds an awful lot like the Brap. But at the same time, it's Evan, and he paddles the tuna. How would you sell this boat to that customer? Because you know that debate's occurring nationwide right now.
That is, and the thing I'd say to that type of person is try out the new Delta V, try out the tuna, sit them down side by side and see what works for your skill set and what in your pattern of movement. Everybody's a little bit different, as Bruce Lee often said. Take what works for you and eliminate what doesn't, and then move forward. I wanted to market this to more of the guy that may be coming from slalom, that may be coming from full beginner, that wants something that's really easy to paddle, that's going to take care of you, that's going to land things really soft, that's going to just be predictable all the way through. And I've gotten to paddle the tuna, and it's a really good boat, but it is wide, it lands pretty hard, and no doubt it is a tried and true design, but I wanted to throw in something into the monkey wrench there that would have something to toss back at those guys and put anybody who wants to excel their and boost their skills, you like that little plug, to the next level by just taking a boat that is really agile and handles the way kind of you'd expect it to. Basically, I just wanted to make a downhill mountain boat.
All right, so turbo booster pockets, go.
That's right. Now the elephant in the room, the booster pockets.
So that was a really fun part of the design. Shane and I were talking about the kind of overall look and overall shape. One of the things we definitely agreed on all the way across, we agreed on many things, but the biggest one as far as changing the shape from the Grande to the Delta V now was to shave some material off of the stern towards the far back grab bar. And now what that will do is by shaving it off, you get a little bit of the Remix feel. And the Remix is really, really good at boofing ledge holes, loading up on the stern, and then boosting forward. Now I'll go into a little bit more of that theory in a second, as when I was growing up, I was always playing with the wood boats, as I said before, and one of the common themes that I started to notice when you're just looking at boats, whether it be paddled by a paddler or just sitting idle going down this creek and grabbed at the bottom, is when you hit a hole, you have a moment where your bow climbs and your stern loads up with the water that's still coming down the ledge, and then the little boost forward is going to happen in almost any boat. So whether you're in a stinger, whether you're in a creek boat, whether you're in a play boat, that boost is going to happen. If you load up too much on the stern, it starts to create a backender. But almost any sort of ledge move, you have a moment of that where even just a little bit of water lapping up on your stern helps to create the boost. Now, when you're watching paddlers, they often will put in a power stroke right as they land a waterfall or land a ledge to help propel them forward, and it does, but the boost is always there. So what I wanted to do is take some of the Remix theory and then try and utilize that water pulse as you hit the hole to create even just a smidgen more horsepower going downstream and getting you out of that feature, getting you past whatever's worrying you. So one morning I went in, was just trying to think about how we could maximize that load pressure to get the boat to continue to propel downstream no matter what the paddler did. And I came in starting to think about engine swirl chambers. I've been a fanatic for diesel engines and diesel technology. Some of y'all may have known, but I find it absolutely fascinating how they design in swirl patterns to fit as much air into a cylinder as they can. They use turbos and superchargers and all this sort of stuff. And I was starting to try and apply that to the kayaking world and see, well, so let's see how much boost can we get from that little tiny pulse. And you stick the boat in the water and you spray a garden hose on the stern and it moves forward. So the theory is there, and it's just how to paddle so you can load and unload that little spring, or the load up and spool, if you will, the turbo boosters. But it becomes a really fun aspect of paddling this boat where you're not just thinking about how's the hull going to do, how's the bow going to go through something. I find myself when I'm paddling this thing often thinking, all right, let me get my bow through something, let me get my stern loaded, and then let me time that boost when I'm hitting the hole and the stern is loading up. I promise you, you feel it in this thing, and it'll help shove you forward, where if you time a forward stroke, you get even more. So with water, because we're paddler powered and gravity powered, any little bit of help goes a long way. So I wanted to put these in here and take it and run with it. And in testing, I was absolutely ecstatic with how much it influenced each little ledge booth and each little landing. So we left it in the design, and I'm really, really happy to get it out there and get people in it and see what they think.
There you go.
So what do you think? I know there's a lot of memes out there regarding the turbo booster pockets.
You betcha. It's the new hot thing.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to try it, and I love it.
Well, hell yeah. Well, Delta. So are we going to see multiple sizes in the Delta V here? Is this just a one size, or what's kind of the plan here for this model?
We're currently eyeing up doing a smaller one. I feel like the lightweight paddlers is a market segment that kind of needs to be hit and looked back upon these days. For young bucks coming up, for ladies in the game and wanting to push their own limits. So, you know, my recent collarbone break kind of slowed that one, but we're continuing to move forward with the prototypes for that. And unfortunately, it wasn't able to come out around the same time, which is optimal as far as sales go. But we will be having one soon. We think the 88 is going to be plenty size for 90% of the guys and gals that are wanting a larger boat. And we're going to keep the Stomper 90 and the Flying Squirrel 95 on as far as limited runs for those guys who just need a really big boat. So as far as sizing goes, we're trying to hit the nail on the head with just 2 models, and that's what we're looking at right now. But looking at it, for sure going to do the 88. I would love to see like a 77 or 73 size, and we'll see how it goes.
How's your collarbone doing?
Thanks for asking. It feels really good. I'm continuing to do PT and rehab exercises every day. I just got done with a big round this morning, and did a little paddle down here at Buena Vista yesterday. So it's feeling good. It's still sore. It's coming along, but there's definitely some gaps as far as bone growth that need to be filled. The bones are healing well, and I'm trying to stay on it and drink bone broth and eat chicken cartilage and everything I can think of. But these things just take time, and this was a really gnarly break. I'm actually really lucky to not have any complications from this one because of the angle at which the shard was pointed straight down into my pectoral muscle and the depth it went down there. It was actually really, really close to my brachial artery.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Well,
So all in all, I'm quite happy, and got to give Liquid Logic Kayaks and Shane Woody a huge shout out for sending me out here so I can get the Delta Vs into the hands of all our new dealers. And thanks to CKS, Main Street, and online. Thanks to Tony at Four Corners and Confluence, all our new dealers. It's a real pleasure working with you guys and getting everything out here and creating some stuff for the new Delta V.
All right, when you make the smaller one, don't make a crazy sized cockpit.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
we
wanna
want it
get
to fit the large keyhole spray skirts that you guys make because they're just absolutely awesome, and that seems to be a good kind of average size. But no, I'm not going to make the cockpit longer than the boat.
Thank you. 88 inches circumference. That's what you want, including the rim.
Have you fixed your sizing chart yet, Weld?
80?
88. 88. When you're
Okay.
ready to do that, let me know. I'll make the best rim that you could possibly put on that boat. It'll be dry as a bone.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'd love to work with you, and we'll bring Shane in and try and get it all nice and dialed. I think they're going to work on it just a little bit as I'm out here in the West, but yeah, I would love to get super seal as far as dry as a bone. That's always good.
So Pat, if our listeners want to follow the Delta V progression and when it comes out of the mold and whatever, where should we send them?
Check out Liquid Logic Kayaks on Instagram and Facebook. You can also follow me, Pat Keller 1 on Instagram and Patrick Keller on Facebook. I have an athlete page, but I don't use it as much. I feel kind of weird about posting pretty often, so I'm kind of more of a lurker. But we're stoked to share everything with you guys as everything comes out. And when we get a couple of boats out of the mold, we'll be posting them up and creating some stoke, because just after that, we'll be sending them off and filling them orders. We're stoked with all the pre-orders that we got. Can't thank everybody enough, and looking forward to it.
If it's anything like the Brap, it's going to be a great boat. The Brap is, I think, one of the best plastic boats ever made, if not the best. So,
thanks, John. Appreciate that. I think this one is even going to be better.
Well,
excellent.
You're 2 for 2 at this point with the green boat and the Brat, Pat. So, Delta V, check it out.
Delta V, it's going to be awesome.
All right, Pat. Well, we'll see you, and thanks for coming on the Hammer Factor.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all having me and taking the time.
Late.
Do you think he's full of it with the turbo boosting pockets? Do you think there's something to it? He was kind of making some sense there towards the end. I don't know. I was kind of buying it.
I was kind of buying it too a little bit.
You got to check it out. I'll tell you, whenever
you can't deny the Brap. I mean, you cannot deny the Brap. That's a phenomenal effort right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also think that making the tip of the stern thin is like crucial for paddling boats in big water, because like when you hit big braking features, kind of like diagonal features sideways that you want to kind of drive across the river with, if the tip of the stern's super big, then your bow just drops immediately. So you can't kind of like push it into the wave at all. And like, I think that's ruined some otherwise passable kayaks for paddling in big water. I think having that thinness in the stern is key.
Well, what hit me was
like mix, but like that boat, or like even if you look at like the Mamba or the Tuna, they get pretty thin at the stern, and then you look at like something like the Shiva or the Flying Squirrel, and they don't do that, and then they're like terrible big water boats.
There we go. Okay, man, this has been an epic episode here.
Yeah, we're back. So we gave you an hour and a half of love on this show. We're gonna skip rants and raves. I'm just gonna.
I got a rave.
Oh, well, I got a. You got a rave?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna rant about flying with kids, and we can just move on to your rave.
Well, you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, that's it. I ranted.
I think we all know what that means, especially those with kids.
It's hell.
I'm raving about the Stony Creek Fest.
Oh, okay.
Last week, I'm comparing and contrasting to the Cheat Fest. Now, the Cheat Fest has evolved into a multi-discipline event, and it was very muddy this year, which wasn't their fault at all. But it's fine for what it is. However, Stony Creek Fest was last weekend. It's in the Stony Creek, just outside of Johnstown, PA, kind of a local run for us here at IR Class 3. But what a delightful festival for paddling. I mean, it was packed full of paddlers. I couldn't believe it. I bet there was 300 people there, camping, staying for the whole weekend. So I don't know, very impressed. The first time I was there, and I'm definitely going to be back, and IR is going to have a bigger presence there next year for sure. So that's it.
Is this a new John Weld we're hearing from? Like 300 people, that's a good thing?
There's a hint of positivity here.
I mean, it was, I don't know. I felt the love, man. It was neat. I had my kid there, and he was kayak. He did Stony Creek, which is like the perfect kids run, and so I don't know. I was starting to realize kayaking is such a terrible sport after all, you know?
Oh man, I'm so happy to hear that. This just made my day. I'm gonna have a second beer.
I had I was approaching peak adventure, maybe. I don't know.
Lewis,
I got nothing.
come on, you should rave about that 4-camera GoPro concept.
I did wear a GoPro for the second time ever this weekend.
Was that like mandatory?
Yeah, that was the timing for the race. I fought, but I didn't want to be too much of a pain about it, so I caved.
This is the man who I gave him a free camo dry suit to wear to test it out, and he returned it because it was camo and he didn't want to be associated with the military. This is a man with principles. So, I don't know. Taking on a GoPro is, you must have swallowed some pride there.
All right, there you have it. Hammer Factor episode 23.
I knew I'd get you back for that one day, and I finally did.
Oh man.
All right. Well, until next week, Hammer Factor Love, we'll have a new website up and running.
It'll be better than it is now. My gosh, what a scene.
By Monday.
All right. Bye, guys.
Later.